Welcome to the Assistant Lab podcast, hosted by Victoria Ratton and Arnell Martin.
This podcast is dedicated to the executive assistant profession, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
We've created this podcast for the outliers, the linchpins, the assistants who are serious about their careers. This is a podcast for those who are preparing for the future today.
This is a space for no-nonsense content, benchmarking and tracking industry and world trends, as well as interesting interviews with exceptionally inspirational people. The goal here is to stimulate new ways of thinking and being in this profession.
So, on with the show.
Welcome to this next episode of the Assistant Lab. We are really excited to introduce our next guest, Fiona Young, who is the founder of Carve, a really exciting company that's been around for just over a year, I believe. But Fiona and Carve are an absolute breath of fresh air to the assistant profession. And I'm talking about in terms of professional development. Fiona's a former executive assistant herself turned digital learning leader. And she founded Carve, which is a company that's building the next generation of AI-powered executive assistants. They've got some really exciting new AI courses on offer at the moment. So I really do suggest checking out the show notes and linking up to their website and some of the free Carve AI tools that are also available for you as well. We go back through her entire working life like we do with all our guests, but what's quite unique about Fiona is she grew up with technologist parents, and so we talk about the positive impact of this, undertaking a degree in economics and how that didn't quite work in terms of her career path like it might, but it actually had a super positive outcome. We talk obviously about L&D a lot and why most corporate learning spend is wasted. Revolution versus evolution, that's an ongoing theme now for this podcast and will be for the foreseeable future. Some of the startling discoveries she made when she started surveying some assistants and how much they really did know about AI. And also, we talk about the fact there will be winners and losers in terms of the EA profession as we continue to go through this period of change over the next decade. But even more importantly, she gives you some incredible tips to win. It's all about the winning here. So without further ado, go and grab your drink or go on your dog walk or do what you need to do. But sit back, walk and be prepared to be inspired. Well, good morning and welcome to the Assistant Lab, Fiona. We're thrilled, so excited to have you on the episode today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you both for having me.
It's such a pleasure. We've been looking forward to catching up on this podcast with you.
Definitely.
Likewise.
And I'm hoping, obviously it's very stormy in my part of the UK, so I'm hoping there's no power cuts and that I don't drop off. We just go with it, go with the flow. So I think you know from some of our previous guests, we like to go back to teenage Fiona, find out what you were thinking career-wise then. Did you go on to university or college? Because, you know, we're from 3 different countries and our education systems are slightly different in how you go up through the ranks, as it were. So what was teenage Fiona thinking and up to?
Oh, yeah. I mean, casting my mind back, I think I was so focused on school. I was always a learner, and that is me through and through to today as well. And I went into economics. You know, I thought I would get a job in finance. I was super interested in that, I think more from a practical perspective. But my true passion was always really writing, you know, and was really social justice and equity. And those are themes that really have run through my whole life. But when I graduated from university with a degree in economics, it was the absolute worst time in the global recession we had of 2008, 2009. And I just could not, for the life of me, find a job working in finance in San Francisco. And so that kind of led to me falling into an admin type role. And I think like so many of us who've gone into this profession, it's not really by choice. But it's interesting looking backwards how actually I am a second generation EA in the venture capital world. My mom, who's British actually, was an EA to a very prominent venture capitalist back in the 90s in Silicon Valley. And my dad as well, was in tech, was a tech journalist, writing about the greatest tech leaders and tech companies of the time. And so I think I've always grown up in this environment. I've really been surrounded by tech, the latest, the greatest tech tools for him to test and trial out. And that's really shaped me for sure, and the passions that I have.
I would have loved having been a technologist growing up. My dad kind of was to a degree. Like he jumped when I remember when Skype first came out, and like he was trying to get the whole family to use it. And we're like, "Oh, what's this?" And he would jump on things very quickly. So he definitely had a mind for it. Can I just ask you a quick question there? Were you, because this has happened here and probably an essay, you go to university, and this is what was sold here. You go to university, you are guaranteed a job relating to the degree you took. Was that a big disappointment when you came out, this financial recession's hit, and you're thinking, because this happened to my sister as well. She
Yeah.
was a law and politics degree, and then she came out, and there was too many people who'd undertaken a law degree, coupled with the recession, there were no jobs.
Yeah. And I think what was frustrating for me was that, I had gone through my second year of uni, had gone through a bit of a kind of revolution where I, for a second, thought about really changing my course of study, because I was taking, actually in the US system, you don't just study what your degree is on. And so about 50% of my course load were courses I was really more passionate about. So a lot of Black studies, women's studies, and American history. And so I went through a bit of a period of thinking, maybe I should just change my major. I really love history with this kind of focus on Black studies and women's studies. And I ended up not doing it because I thought, do the practical thing, Fiona, and do the reasonable, realistic thing, And so I think it was really, all that kind of the thought that I was doing the practical thing, that I'd have a job so easily with a good degree in economics, kind of came to a screeching halt. But it's interesting looking backwards too, how sometimes you can trace, there's a reason for why that happened. I spent 6 months living at home with my parents and my kid brother, and developed really close kind of adult relationships with my parents, especially my dad at that time. Which, and I also spent 6 months cooking and learning how to, ferment and make cheese and do all sorts of interesting things I wouldn't have had the time to do if I had jumped straight into a job. And so yeah, looking backwards, I think I'm quite grateful for that chance to have a bit of a breather between uni and starting my first job. But yeah, absolutely, it was a huge disappointment.
Coming back to that from a South African perspective, it is estimated now that 60% of our youth are unemployed. So being a graduate means nothing in this country. And I think sometimes we take it for granted. I think it's been sold as such a important part of, you've got to decide what you're going to do for the rest of your life, and you've got to make sensible choices. But even with those sensible choices, I think sometimes talented individuals are left out of professions. But I think sometimes it is the loss of the profession they were attempting to go into when they actually find the EA profession. And it's funny that you mentioned, this came across your path. I think a lot of assistants resonate with this. This was never the plan. It found me because I had the right personality and I had the right mindset, because I do think everything else can be taught, but I think you've got a personality that resonates with this job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Fiona, talk us through the sort of admin EA career, and then you ended up working sort of Hive, who I do know of. How did you connect the dots there?
Yeah, so I had worked for a few years in Sacramento, the state capital of California, in an admin role supporting an association management company. So working for nonprofit local government associations. Government is big business in Sacramento because it's, roughly the same size economy, the state of California, as the entire UK.
Wow.
So you can imagine the kind of government presence in that city is huge, just like Westminster is here. And then I really had always wanted to move to London. I actually thought about moving to London for uni, and I kind of scrimped and saved on a really like my low starting salary to be able to pull together enough money to do it on my own 2 feet. And so in 2012, in my 20s, I moved over to London. I had nowhere to live, no job, didn't know what I was headed for, but I knew that I had this great superpower, these admin skills, and a real affinity for that role, like you were just talking about, Anel. And I ended up falling into this role assisting a venture capitalist at the firm Blenheim Chalcott, which is a venture builder. So it's sort of a hybrid between venture capital, accelerator, incubator. So I really had front row seats to seeing how, the chaotic process of how businesses are built, how products are built. And I worked very, very closely. So I supported co-founding partner, but worked very closely with his co-founder. Just both of them absolutely incredible businessmen, super, super talented, super successful, very young, vibrant, and I'm still in touch with them today and quite tight with them today. And so I basically, started off assisting him, but from day one, even in my interview, actually, I remember saying to him, listen, I don't think I'm a career assistant. I want this job, don't get me wrong, and I think I will thrive in this job, but I do want to try some other things. And he said, well, that's great, because actually looking backwards, all my best assistants, I've ended up putting into different businesses in this group and have moved on to other things. So we sort of had this agreement from day one. And then within the first 6 months of working with him, I started building a learning program off the side of my desk with him, a high potentials program for the group. And that I ran alongside being an EA for several years, and it eventually morphed into a full-time role. And they created this role for me to run learning for the Blenheim Chalcott group, so 3,000 people across 25 different ventures. And I did that for a few years, and then I moved into Hive Learning, which is a B2B peer learning app, part of the Blenheim Chalcott group, in order to start up a whole programs function. So learning programs, learning content for big corporate clients. And in that role, I worked with, clients as varied as the Olympics, Barclays, Boots, Diageo, Virgin Money. You name it, I've probably worked with them or with one of their competitors, a lot of household names. And was basically, was really trying to build this next generation digital learning experiences for folks in corporates, primarily managers and leaders. And what we were trying to do is bring together the best of face-to-face learning and digital learning. So, and I can talk about this at great length. So, set it aside for now, unless you really want to dive deep. But digital learning is notoriously ineffective, and face-to-face is notoriously expensive and not scalable. And so how do you kind of bring together the best of the communication, collaboration, and sharing that you get face-to-face with the structured resources that you can do asynchronously on your own time zone digitally? And in a sort of vibrant, the sort of content you want to consume that's world class, that you're seeing out of the best media agencies. Why isn't learning content that good? So that's what we tried to do, is create the greatest learning content and the greatest learning experiences digitally. And yeah, I guess where that led me to where I am now is essentially just becoming, I spent 5 years in that role working on leadership development, primarily programs for corporates, and saw firsthand just how much of learning budgets are put onto leaders. And it got me reflecting more and more about my time as an EA and thinking, yeah, I didn't really get formal development. I got a lot of informal development, that's for sure. But I never got that opportunity. And I also never found anything that I thought was truly great. I never found kind of conferences or events or programs that really spoke to me and I felt would really move me to the next level in my career. And so I started thinking maybe I am the person to build this, because who else? I know this role and I know what great digital learning looks like, and I know how to move people forward and really change behaviors. And so that's what got me, a year ago, basically leaving my job and starting up my own business to do just that.
I think you are, and I know Nell's going to back me up here, you are much needed in this space.
Absolutely.
Now, the issues and Nell and I are very, very clear, being trainers ourselves, what we're good at training on. And we're not trainers who will go and create a presentation on something that's not our area of expertise. And that happens in every profession. But I think we were talking on the last podcast with Jess about wash, rinse, repeat with a lot of these programs, and there's been such a lack on the AI kind of digital side. As far as we've got, it's always been about Office 365. And we've been sort of sitting there going, and you get people standing up on conference platforms at PA conferences or virtual events and saying, this is AI is not going to take an assistant's role. And that's about as much, really. There's no scope to it. There's no detail. And the reality is nobody knows what's going to happen in 10 years' time. We can make some predictions, and I have got some predictions for the UK on what I think is going to happen to the profession. But that doesn't encompass AI because that's not my area of expertise. And so when you contacted one of our board members, and then she was like, oh my God, and she put you in our board WhatsApp group, everyone was like, oh my God, there's finally somebody there. Like, everybody was so excited about what you're bringing to the market.
And
thank
you. Just based off the back of, the AI discussion, I think it's very important to understand that, I read an article during the week saying that a Polish company, I don't know if you saw it, Vic, that Jan posted, a Polish company now has an AI CEO. And would you work for the AI CEO? And reading through the comments was quite amusing. And I actually really took a moment and sat back and thought, would I? And realized I probably would. I think it's the same as any relationship, but the conversation is always the EA will be replaced. But I mean, there's a Da Vinci medical device that does the operations. So doctors are at risk. There are many professions at risk, but we always come back to, you've got to do the human stuff really well, the stuff that AI cannot compete on. And again, I have a giggle every time I see, I don't make tea. I don't do this. I'm like, guys, you're missing a trick here. I'm not saying let yourself be abused, but that AI cannot make that cup of tea. That's actually somewhere where you can get a bit of traction, a little bit of that personal touch thing is going to be important. So always very, very intrigued. And prior to this podcast, logged on to ChatGPT to go and explore so that I at least know what we're talking about when we get together this morning. I think it's very important that we, at this point, talk about how you see the future playing out.
Yeah, I think both of you have said points that have really resonated with me just there. And, I would sum it up by saying, I'm hearing a lot of fear from people about what's going to happen to my job. And by the way, that's outside of the EA profession. Yeah. That's all of us.
Everybody.
What I would say is that AI won't take your job, but it will fundamentally change it. And I think if we look backwards, actually, it's really valuable to look at what the evolution of this role has been. Because if you think about, the days of the 50s, the 60s of typing pools and, moving into the sort of 70s and 80s, the creation of the executive assistant role, really. And how that really has evolved due to tech every time. It was okay, we have typewriters back 100 years ago. And then it was, well, now, we have word processors, and now we have fax machines, and now we have, computers and emails and mobile phones, and even some of the incredible tool stack, like, Microsoft Suite, Excel, those sorts of, like, in the 90s and 2000s, the spreadsheet, the era of the spreadsheet, all these things have transformed the way that we work and have absolutely transformed what it means to be an EA. And so I think that you could make the argument, this is just the next chapter in that story, and that this is an evolution of the role. And I think that's true. But I also think that it is a revolution. And that's because, if you look at some of the statistics, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics put out a report saying that, they estimated between 2021 and 2031, they predicted that EAs were number 16 on the list of the most vulnerable occupations in America to automation. Number 16, that's alongside like shoemakers and factories, so, and I think nobody really saw this coming. But actually, if you look backwards at their data, is super interesting. Between the previous 10 years, 2011 to 2021, you can see that there was a decline of 20%. in this role. So over a 20-year period, that's a decline of 35%. And PS, this report was put out before Gen AI exploded. So I suspect that they probably under-egged it. So I absolutely think there will be a revolution where there will be winners and there will be losers. And I think that it's the more repeatable admin that's going to be automated. It's folks who are doing jobs where there's, you know, the most kind of simple, repeatable admin, the more junior type roles will be the first to go, is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But I also think we'll see more of this trend we've seen anyway of, you know, instead of having, you know, executive team, maybe having 4 or 5 EAs, maybe you'll see that team being able to get away with 3. And what happens to those other people? Are they able to retrain? Are they able to reskill and really retool themselves into another role in that organization? And so I think, you know, when I talk about this, I like to talk about like the tips to win, because there are things that we can do. You know, we do have some control over the future, but it starts now, you know, and I think a lot of people I'm talking to are super complacent. Like I've spoken to 75 EAs in the last 3 months alone about AI specifically. And I literally, I think out of those 75 people, one of them has truly embraced AI tools. 1 out of 75. So, you know, I would say that there is a long way to go for us to really take these tools, you know, seize them and use them to our advantage to make sure that we're really writing our own future here.
We've been far too complacent. Absolutely. Well, I know had a bit of an analogy for it in the last podcast, but it's actually frightening. And I think part of it, and especially for the UK, is, well, I work for the CEO, so I'm protected. It won't matter, they'll always need me. But then there's never any chatter about the fact we've got millennial and Gen Z CEOs and C-suite teams coming in now who are literally brought up on technology and you know, they could frankly run rings around a few assistants as it stands at the moment. So yeah, I think
2 things come up for me very strongly. You mentioned those repeatable tasks. Seth Godin said, you know, if I can tell you, if you can explain to me what you do, or I have to give you an instruction to do a job, then you are replaceable. So I've always put it through that filter. If somebody has to, if I'm waiting for that instruction, I'm at risk. Because then they can give that instruction to somebody cheaper or put that instruction into AI. So for me, that was a very profound way of looking at it, that if you're not building the map, if you're not creating the map, if you're following the map, you've got problems. The other thing that came up very strongly for me is, Vic and I've been saying for years now, and you know, I'm lucky like you are. Your father was in the tech space, but my husband is in the tech space. So he's always, I mean, he's working very heavily in more of an R&D kind of looking to the future. So for me, I've been saying now for 3 years, AI is coming. AI is coming. And it's like nobody, and everyone kind of thinks this is just going to be a minor shift. This is going to be, and is already becoming, monumental. And Fiona, the time frame of how this is now starting to be used and how quickly it's turning over is absolutely tremendous. But the fact that EAs think we can just maintain the status quo, and I'm not saying this to scare anybody, I'm just saying we cannot think that the world is going to continue the way it is now. And I've said to Vic for a very long time now, I do believe that the route for the future EA will be individual, highly individualized. So you've got to be in an organization. I can't give you a map. There is no global map. There is no global, this is what you do to be successful. This is what you do. I firmly believe you've got to, in your context, in your company, see where you can add value, see where you can do the human work, see where you can add value, where you can save resources. But that's going to be highly individualized. And I love the fact that you said early in your career, you said, you know, I'm open to opportunity. My job description will not look like anybody else's, no matter where I work, because I'm curious. And, you know, if I don't have enough to do, I'll put up my hand. And I think that's something that we need to encourage, that it becomes broader than the EA job scope, because that's how you're going to be sustainable. That's my thoughts on that one.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally agree. And I love that Seth Godin, by the way. I hadn't heard that line, but if I have to explain this to you, it's
Then
such a
you are
good point.
replaceable.
it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And I also I think as well that we've been seeing over the last 5-10 years this move towards offshoring EAs and also move towards, reducing the headcounts of EA teams and having folks support larger teams of execs and leaders at a sort of a lighter level. So sort of skimming the surface across more people rather than being able to provide deeper support in a one-to-one or one-to-two sort of setup. So both of those are also kind of worrying trends that are separate, but related to the AI thing. And to your point about curiosity, I think absolutely it starts with mindset. I mean, that's my personal view is like all of us need to be really leaning into this stuff and asking, how might this help me go faster? Rather than being fearful, defensive, avoidant, all those things, which I'm definitely seeing and hearing in some of the things I see online and
A lot
conversations
of
I'm having.
resistance.
Exactly. And so I think if the starting point is seeing AI as an opportunity, not a threat, opening your mind to what might be out there that could help me and really going after that, I think we all have to commit to constant learning and unlearning in this next age of AI, literally everyone. And really trying to commit to getting ahead of the curve on it and staying ahead too, because it is moving so quickly, as you say. And so I guess, yeah, I mean, the four things I said this recently in a presentation, 4 things I think to win in the age of AI for EAs. I'd say number 1 is mindset. Number 2 is to really embrace AI, which I touched on just there, like really dive into the latest tools, understand them inside out, understand how might this help me? What is the art of the possible? And where can I get the most leverage in my workflow? And then also, really become a leader in your organization. EAs are in such a powerful role, working at the highest levels, understanding the business, the big picture of the business, and also having relationships across every level in the organization, like such a prime position to drive change. And by the way, I think this is all, it's great to free up time to be more effective and more efficient, do more in your role, but also it's great to use these tools to just give yourself some work-life balance. A lot of EAs I know are working like 60+ hour weeks, week on week, and it's not sustainable. Like, take on these great tools we have in front of us, many of which are free or very low cost, to give yourself some time back. And then I'd say the third one, is really to lean into more strategic projects. So if you can shortcut some of that repeatable admin. So for instance, with some of the calendar tools, we're not there yet where they're obviously taking over complex diary management today, but absolutely there are tools out there that will shortcut hours per week off of your workload. And what happens when, say fast forward a year as these tools become more powerful, diary management is no longer 60% of your role, say, but it's 20% of your role. What do you do with that other 40%? And I think it starts with really seeking out opportunities for stretch. So, and being proactive about that. Where can I get involved? And maybe it's supporting the people team or internal comms or taking on other projects to show your value, your worth, that you're relevant, even as your role is sort of being reshaped beneath your feet. And then I think the fourth one is actually rewrite your own role. We're all going to have to rewrite our job spec, essentially.
Absolutely.
And given you're the expert at what you do, who better to be on the front foot thinking about, okay, in a year's time, if my repeatable admin workload goes down by 50%, what will I be spending my time doing? And start having that conversation with your boss, with your organization now, with your HR team maybe, and think about what could you do with that extra capacity. So yeah, those are my 4 tips. Mindset, embrace AI, is taking on strategic projects and building your leadership skills, and then finally rewriting your role. I think those are the 4 kind of keys to win from where I sit now. Obviously, as you said, this is moving so quickly and no one has a crystal ball,
And I think, Fiona, there's a couple of things that resonated there. If you talk about that being proactive and not putting your head in the sand, I think the fear component, people don't want to be adopters, but if you can think of in terms of especially and I hadn't thought about it this way, so thanks for that, Fiona, is how much impact this can make for somebody who's managing multiple executives. Having to put together documentation. There's so much scope to use this as a tool when you have multiple managers that you're looking after to take those routine. So I think it really is something that people who are managing the, multiple portfolios should really look into seriously. What can I use out of this? And you said a very interesting thing. For me, I always say to people, technology, you should think about what's in it for me. Okay. That way you take a lot of the fear component out. Find out what I can do with this and how it can be of value to me. Don't be afraid of it. I think that's a very important thing, the mindset. Just saying, I'm willing to accept, I'm willing to adopt, I'm willing to find out what benefit there is for me and my team in this. And I think that changes the whole engagement with that technology.
Yeah, I think,
totally.
you know what? I think some British assistants will sit there and think, well, my boss won't let me do this. My company won't let me do this, because there's still some very traditional sectors in this country that are still using assistants as 1980s secretaries. And, and then I'll sit and coach an assistant. This is how you could do it. They go and have the wipe the slate clean meeting, which Susie used to recommend. And then it gets nowhere. And then I'm like, but why are you sticking around? Because those sectors will eventually have to catch up. You can't put your career on hold for that. And there's a couple of other things. I'm probably going to sound really cruel now, but we always said we would never hold back on this podcast. I see a lot on socials about we're superheroes and we're amazing. And I do think EAs are amazing, but not all EAs are high performing EAs. And there is another side to that story.
Yeah.
But I think we've got caught in the superhero narrative so much over the last decade, which is where it's been prevalent, that we've either got PAs who are completely disempowered, they're feeling really not great about this role, lack of confidence, which we've talked a lot about on the pod, or they're up here, I'm a superhero, I'm untouchable because I'm an EA, that's it, I don't have to do any more. And we've got these two sort of sides to the profession now, where they're closed minds because as far as they're concerned, they're Mary Poppins and that's it. They don't have to do a whole lot more. And then we've got, as I say, other assistants who do want to do more and are realizing what's happening, but they don't have the confidence, they don't have the influence to kind of drive that forward, in their own organizations.
It's definitely a tale of two extremes. And, that's not just a UK reality. We have it in South Africa as well. And, I've worked with people from 13 different countries. It resonates. It's either this very inflated view or this very passive, contained, kind of held back role where it's almost that victim mode. So it would be nice if we could just get everyone closer to the center. Find that center line. You can be slightly above or below on any given day, but let's just find the center here. This superhero narrative, you never hear people talking about pilots as being superheroes. It's almost, demeaning in a way. It's sort of, can't find the English word for it now, but sort of talking down to somebody in that narrative, So I think it would be great if EI becomes that equalizer where, you adopt, you adapt, and you thrive. And those who are unserious, unfortunately, will find themselves by the wayside. Those who think they've got nothing to learn, I think, are also massively at risk.
Yeah. I mean, I think from what I've seen and heard, and just actually to rewind a little bit, so before I really started doing discovery work in AI, I spent the first 5 months of this year doing discovery work with EAs just about their career, their ambitions, learning and development, what that meant to them. And I spoke to over 100 EAs in that process. And so one thing that I heard loud and clear was feeling underappreciated. And I think that's where that, the whole superhero thing comes in, is that probably some very well-intentioned folks trying to shake up this space, just like you are, but in a different way, have come along and tried to really let's boost people's confidence and let's and I totally agree with you. There's definitely a lot of, unlike any other profession, there's a lot of very kind of exclusionary, very feminine
Mm.
brands out there, lots of pink and fizzy and free prosecco, and
Unicorns.
absolutely can be demeaning. But I think it comes from a well-intentioned place,
Yeah, it
actually,
does.
of really wanting assistants to feel valued, because at the end of the day, so often they are misunderstood. And I've definitely been in that position too, you know, or
Yeah,
they are
we
just
all have.
treated like the office help. And it's like, oh, can you book me this meeting room? We have an online booking system where, you know, you have access to it. Did you lose your login? Let me connect you with the IT team. They can help you with that. You know, like those sorts of things where, you know, you do get oftentimes treated. It really depends on the culture of the organization and the individual that, you know, you're working with. But I think that's where it comes from. But I do see what you're saying, that you have this kind of, on the one hand, folks feeling I'm a superhero and, you know, using this as a real boost, and perhaps not thinking critically about actually how do I drive my career forward, and how do I be effective, and how can I be a more strategic partner, and use tools like AI to really stay ahead of curve and be the kind of future assistant that the world needs to be, the assistant of 2024, not of 1984. And you're right, absolutely. On the other hand, I see the lack of confidence come through loud and clear. And I think that's, you know, partly because of the way that EAs are misunderstood and oftentimes mistreated, as I just spoke about. But I think it's also, there's an element of misogyny in there, you know, and we know that gender plays, you know, a huge dynamic here, because the vast majority of senior executives are male and the vast majority of assistants are female. And so that absolutely plays a part, and is something that I've spoken to a lot of people in this space about, actually, assistants and folks who are, you know, trainers and community leaders and so forth. And it is definitely there, and it is real.
Yeah. You know, I saw a startling statistic the other day, and I don't have it offhand, but I think it was something like women in feedback sessions have 73% more negative feedback than men. And often that feedback is based around personality things. So, and this woman was saying they actually did a big research study. So we as women must look at feedback assessments differently. It often is based on personality things. I mean, we've all been told, don't be so soft, be more assertive. You know, a lot of EAs get that kind of feedback. So I think a lot of it is from a male's point of view. So just that filter, and realizing that it's not a you problem, it's a gender grouping problem, sometimes alleviates a lot of those issues that you have. And I do think you've made a very good point about, you know, that well-meaning inflation, or the, you know, trying to uplift people. But I do firmly believe that starts internally. Only I can do that for me. And, you know, I think by standing your ground sometimes, and by working on that internal confidence, I've got to say, I got to certain ages in EA where I had respect from everybody, but not because of what I do, but because of who I am, you know. And I think we've got to forget about the tag added to the profession. It starts with you and how you engage. And if everyone engages professionally and engages assertively and communicates effectively, that will bubble out automatically. But I can't change that perception, and I can't artificially do it for you. So I think we need to start thinking in those terms as well.
I think a couple of points. I think, and I've kind of touched on it before, I'm brutal at times, but it's the truth. I think our industry has fed some of this. Now, when I was a young teenager, I did pick this as a profession. I knew at 16 I was going into secretarial college, and I, even for a millennial, veteran millennial, I have gone up the traditional route. I was office junior, you know, junior secretary, PA. I became an EA at a very senior level at 21 years old in London. That was almost unheard of then. It didn't happen at that age, but between 16 and 21, I ferociously pushed, and I pushed, and I pushed. One of the reasons I picked this profession, the perception of it back then was, this is a kick-ass profession. Like, I want some of this. This looks incredible. And now what I see is quite a fragile profession. I understand some of the dynamics. Lehman Brothers collapsing in 2008. Our profession was decimated in the UK. Our predecessor said we were at roughly between 650 to 725,000 PAs. When I worked on an article with the FT just before the pandemic, they said we were sitting around 153,000. That's huge.
That's a call.
And the industry never talks about it, but it is huge. So I understand the confidence and the fragility around being an assistant now. But then I raised a post in the EPAA Facebook group, Fiona. I know you won't have seen this, but I said, look, guys, I've been on LinkedIn today. I've just seen a couple more posts saying PAs, we need PAs are not just PAs, they're more than this, like that, those kind of posts. You're not just a PA, you're amazing. And I said to the assistants in the EPAA Facebook group, stop responding to these posts on LinkedIn, because it's creating this victim narrative where you're all going to go under and say, you know, oh, I'm not, of course, we're not just PAs. And it's not mostly PAs putting them posts up, it's recruiters. There was 2 recruiters that did it last week. And I know loads of PAs, and they're not just PA. Let's just stop responding to this nonsense. Why can't we have posts put up saying, like some of the examples I gave in that Facebook group, which was I was awarded a seat on the board on behalf of the admin population for this FTSE 250 company. I fundamentally challenged my board whilst taking minutes in the meeting. I interrupted their meeting and challenged their stance on competitiveness. And now they've completely changed how they look at competition. Like, you know, I gave examples, and these are real life
saved the company X amount of dollars or pounds or rands.
But instead we have to keep putting up posts saying we're more than just a pit. Stop feeding into the narrative, because we're just going round and round in this hamster wheel, and we're so much better than woe is me as a profession. We are kick ass, but that's not how we come across.
So it's true. And I actually think that EAs have a branding issue. You know, I think that the title isn't helping for sure, but I don't think, you know, I know this whole question about should we change the title, and there's been this proliferation of different titles coming out in the last few years, executive business partner being one of them, executive operations manager, you know, all sorts of different things. I think that could be part of the solution for sure. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think it's the whole answer. You know, we need to really reshape perceptions of what this role is. And as you say, it's not through, you know, fluffy, fizzy, feel-good posts. It's through showing value. And, you know, one of my advisors is worked for a very, very senior executive as a true right hand. You know, advising him actually reshaped his reputation in the firm that he was in. And to this day, even though she doesn't work for him anymore, she carries on informally advising him on some of the decisions he's taking and his perception in that firm. You know, I've talked to someone else as well who, you know, brought in to a professional services firm because of her network of EAs, was able to get her boss a meeting with a very prominent person in the industry that he's working in and you know, basically selling to, open the door to that meeting, which then brought in literally tens of millions of pounds to this firm. And it's like, we need to be thinking more strategically about how can I add true value? And by the way, that is part of this AI. That's part of how we solve the question of will AI take my job, is how do I add that value, add to the bottom line, and show that I am a true partner and that I am more than, you know, as you say, a 1980s secretary.
We're going to talk about your course in a moment, well, what you're offering in terms of L&D, and Elle can chip in for the South Africa piece. But in the UK, you look at all the qualifications we've got for assistants, and there are a few, and some of them are frankly just duff as anything. They're probably not going to help you get beyond 9, 10 a.m. in the morning, let alone the rest of the day. But not a single provider has modules on anything technologist related outside of Office 365. And I kind of, Boris Johnson, our then Prime Minister, and even Theresa May had set up, they were talking about the technologist skill gap in the UK, and there was a charter put forward, and they were saying that everyone needs to become technologists in some part or another. And so I remember presenting to a group of PAs at the time saying, like, none of you are coders, you don't even understand data science, you know, cybersecurity. Not a single PA in the UK has got a basic certificate in cybersecurity. So that's what I said to them at the time. And I remember saying to some of the PA trainers, why haven't you got any modules, even if you have to bring in the expertise? It absolutely didn't agree with me that it was relevant, that it was all about, you know, leadership and things like that. And I'm like, but no. So tell us about what you're doing, because frankly, it's so exciting. And obviously, and now I've cut you off there. I don't know what happens with qualifications in South Africa. Never asked you.
You know, on our side, I think we are genuinely in almost a survival mode. You know, after the pandemic, very little of the training stuff has bounced back. What I am seeing is rinse, repeat. I know you like that phrase, rinse, repeat.
It's
a lot of, you know, minute taking and wellness in the workplace, and, you know, like the tried and tested themes. But I don't think it's getting traction because everyone's seen it before. So on our side, there is very little available. If you are interested, you go and find those opportunities out of the PA training space. So that is the lay of the land on our end.
Yeah. And actually, I'd like to sort of back up before I talk about what I'm up to and just paint the picture of where we are with learning in AI and in general, actually, the state of corporate learning today. There was a WEF report, the World Economic Forum report that came out earlier this year on AI and on reskilling the workforce that predicted that 60% of the workforce will need reskilling in the next 5 years, which is staggering. 60%. So the majority of people in work right now will need to be reskilled in 5 years. That's pretty incredible. And so I think when you look as well at the state of corporate learning today, I think the latest stats that I saw on how much money is spent in corporate learning in the US, so I don't have global stats, but in the US alone for 2022 is estimated to be just over $100 billion. And alongside that, studies have shown that at its absolute best, there's only a 12% rate of learning transfer in digital learning programs, courses, spend, essentially. So if you do the math, the amount of money, I mean, I know that just over 100 billion spend includes face-to-face and digital. So, you know, I can't tell you exactly the dollar amount wasted there, but 12%, right? So that means that the vast majority of online courses are not leading to a significant long-term change, either to knowledge or to skills. And so I think when you look at it closely, really, we're using a really outmoded model of learning. You know, it's expert-led with a huge amount of content. It's just talking at people, things like webinars that don't allow for that collaboration and two-way exchange. And it's, you know, if there's any activity involved at all, it's something really stupid like a quiz that really doesn't engage people. You know, so this lonely learning idea of going online and clicking through some stuff or giving people large libraries of content, you know, it's unengaging, it's unmotivating, and it's really unlikely to lead to long-term sustained change, right? We need to make that change. What we need is for people to practice what they're learning, for people to have that personalization, choose your own adventure style in what they're learning. And also we need that pure element. People learn best in groups with other people. So bringing groups together, bringing together communities of practice where you're learning together from each other is absolutely critical. So that's, you know, all of that is like, I mean, I could go on about my kind of ethos for learning, but really one thing that you mentioned about, you know, learning being outmoded is absolutely spot on. You know, we need learning to be much more agile. You know, it needs to be fresh and constantly evolving. And that was always the approach I took at Hive, and absolutely the approach I'm taking now in my business, Carve, with our courses, is that I will never deliver the same course twice, because it is literally constantly evolving. And even content that's not on something as fluid as AI, it is constantly evolving based on what you learn and the feedback that you're getting. And, you know, so I think that's absolutely critical to create really impactful learning experiences. And so what I'm doing with Carve is really trying to help EAs build their AI superpower. And so that's through understanding what AI is and how it might change your role, and then diving into chatbots like ChatGPT and others, understanding how to get the best out of them and understanding all the ways. I mean, I have a guide of the 130 ways you can use a chatbot in your day-to-day workflow. You know, so kind of opening people's eyes to that and giving them the tools for prompting to get really great outputs out of it. And then diving into really a journey of discovery for folks on the broader AI tech stack. So what are the calendar tools? What are the email tools? What are the task management tools? What are the tools around, you know, documenting SOPs and processes in your business? What are the meeting transcription and minute taking tools? What are all these tools that are out there right now, this universe? Which are the ones that will give you the most leverage in your workflow? And getting people to work through that in their job, right, on the job, and practice that, and to discover and uncover what's really going to help me go faster. So that's what it's all about. And it's very high touch. It's a very active learning experience. It's not a passive come along and sit through some webinars. It's really about getting involved and also learning from some of the most cutting edge EAs out there. And this program is US, UK. So we have folks from Silicon Valley, we have folks from the East Coast of the US and the UK, open to people globally though. So there's a great exchange of ideas and ways of working that happens on AI as well as on automation, no code automation. So using tools like Zapier and Relay, which is another really interesting emerging area, I think, for this role that literally all but 2 EAs I've spoken to in my research have said, Zappa, what? I've never heard of it before. So, huge amount to learn and to be able to improve using these tools for sure.
And Fiona, what I loved about what you were saying is the exploration, the physical hands-on experience, because I think once people see what the technology can do, the light bulbs go off. I mean, my mother is a real estate agent in her deep 60s. And one day she said to me, she speaks Afrikaans as her first language, and she was having difficulty doing a posting about the real estate. And I said, well, why don't you just put it into ChatGPT? And she was absolutely blown away. So my mother at 65 is now an adopter of AI and absolutely loves working with it and is so excited every time it magically throws out a piece of content for her, which I was so surprised that she was open to this. But the excitement, I think once you've just dug into it, you've just used a little bit, you've just explored a little bit, the opportunities, you suddenly think, oh, I can do this and I can do this. So I think just embrace and take that first step. I love what you're saying about these working through packages. I mean, you've mentioned a few. I'm one of those people who said, Zapier what? Now I have something to put on my list this afternoon. Go and Google Zapier. But I think just being open to those tools that are out there, and it's exciting. I think anyone who's sticking their head in the sand is missing a trick. You can make your life so much easier, so much more efficient, free up time. I loved what you said. I firmly believe that, work-life balance. I've been trying to find this work-life balance for many years. One of my clients always says work-life blend. So I thought that sounds a bit sexier. We'll go with work-life blend. But I think this will help you with that blend. That it will help you just win some of that time back, and there's an upside, there's a value for you. So, don't be afraid.
I mean, I'm going to be a bit radical here, and I'm going to say I think it should be sort of almost mandatory that assistants go through Fiona's course as that you have got at least that level of understanding to be an assistant. And I know assistant job adverts, especially in the UK, are dull as dishwater. They certainly wouldn't attract me if I was 16 now. There's no way I'd come into the role with how it's advertised now. It's boring. But I think the part of this revolution that we'll see over the next decade, and there's lots of strands to that, but I do think you'll start to end up with some of what Fiona's been talking about and your expertise, Fiona. I think that will actually be put into job adverts as not a desirable, but you must have.
As a must have.
And with the World Economic Forum figures you've quoted there, Fiona, 5 years ain't a lot of time, and it goes quickly. We've already lost 3 years to a pandemic, almost 3 years.
And, just coming back to the development side, I always advise people, be very careful on how you are spending your training budgets. Yes, mitigate the things that you are not good at, great. But also spend development funds on something that you're exceptionally good at, so you can take it to the next level. Don't always go and, finance for non-financial managers. I'm sure every EA in the world has done that one, and it hasn't added a lot of value. Mitigate, but don't only spend on the gaps. And then also develop on the tech side if you have that ability, but at least have an understanding. But then if you look at the top skills from the World Economic Forum, the top skills for 2025, which I really dig into, assistants have 8 out of 10 of those skills before they get up in the morning. even an average assistant has 8 out of 10. Those are that's the pin-up, that's the perfect employee they're trying to recruit for. A lot of those skills are heavy on the human components. I don't like to call them soft skills anymore. They are survival skills right now, but a lot of them are communication-based. So look at it in 2 ways. Look at what can technology do for me, and how do I boost the human skills? Does that resonate with you? Do you think that is part of what we should be looking at?
Absolutely. And I mean, in general, strengths-based development, which is what you're talking about, really focusing on your strengths and doubling down on those. There's a whole raft of, learning research that shows that is the best way to use your time when it comes to learning and spend your learning, budget. I definitely agree with you. And my vision for sure for Carve is to go on to build additional courses in helping people to build those very human skills and also the strategic assistant type skills. So to do more project management, to understand better stakeholder management, all these great things, which we already do. And, depending on the assistant, some folks do it more or less as part of their role, but to really double down on those, because those are the skills we'll need for this role in the future. So completely agree with you. And I think the human side, in my opinion, I actually think EAs are well placed. As you say, the skills that we have, the skills that we have will really serve us in the age of AI. But, we also must not lose sight of staying on that front foot with AI and with the AI tools and really using them to our advantage so that we can win in this phase.
I think it's exciting. On your course, sorry, very quickly, just because I'll get this from EPA members, how long is it? So if they do the main course that you're offering at the moment, is it 2 days in a classroom, or how long is it?
So it spans 7 weeks, and but it's really only a 2-hour to 3-hour maximum time commitment each week. And the reason why it's spaced like that is there's a whole lot of research that shows that spaced repetition really helps people to learn and helps you to take that stuff you've learned and go put it into practice and come back together and be held accountable to actually having done something with it, which is what really drives true and sustained behavior change over time. So that's why it kind of spans quite a bit of time, nearly 2 months. And it's, so we essentially have a weekly, very interactive 75-minute session as a group every week. There's some pre-session content, there's some post-session things for you to think about, reflections, and then there's the major project, of course, that's about uncovering your personal AI tool stack. So there's actually a couple weeks of those 7 weeks we don't have planned seminar type sessions, but instead we have a series of drop-ins, and those are both dedicated to different tools. So with demos, including from some suppliers coming in and showing you how to get the best out of their tools, and then also some drop-ins that are really discussion sessions. So small group discussions about the project at hand based around the types of tools that you're most interested in. So you can really connect with peers who are on this journey as well. And again, all designed to really drive change and accountability.
Love it. Well, we're going to share a link to the course in the show notes, 100%. So
amazing. And I have some free guides as well, and planning to do some sort of more entry level sessions as well in late 2023, early 2024, to help folks who aren't quite there yet and can't commit to a full blown program to just get their feet wet and meet you where you are, really. So I'll share those links to the free guides in the show notes as well, so people can dive in and get some value out of how to prompt and how to use chatbots and some reviews of some of the greatest AI tools for EAs right now.
Awesome.
This is so exciting. Like 2024 onwards, it's just going to be so exciting. I'm over 2023, and no one knows that I've been over it since the summer.
We keep saying in South Africa, we're now in the season of let's do that next year.
Yeah.
So, that's the refrain for the next couple of weeks. So I must tell you, it's been such an interesting discussion.
Oh, yeah.
I think not only from, talking about the AI tools and what we should be looking at, but the fact that we talked about how the brain-based learning takes place, how you've developed this, to be absolutely maximized for the brain and for learning. I mean, that's something that struck me immediately. I'm a neuroscience-based coach. So a lot of these things you're talking about, I know that this has been put together quite deliberately, and it does make a difference, that engagement as a group over the tools, discussing, playing with it, the feedback sessions, the staggering of the sessions, that all sounds incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, we do like to kind of finish off with a couple of things. Like any lessons learned so far, Fiona, throughout your career coming out of university and having this career path you now have, and any sort of top tips you might give to assistants who are frankly on the floor at the moment, wondering whether they should still do this job, going into next year themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what I've learned over my career is certainly that you create your own success, right? We all have so many opportunities within our control, and you are in control of your life. You have the power to change it if it's not working for you. And I think one thing that you said, Vic, really resonated, and I didn't pick up on it earlier, but if you're in an industry, if you're in a company or you're working for an exec and it is not working for you, you can change that. Be very intentional about the types of opportunities that you want to take on and where you want to spend your time and spend your energy. And yeah, I mean, that would definitely be my top tips. I could go on, but
that's a great takeaway.
It's prevalent right now, but really excited to be working with you 2024 and beyond.
Likewise.
I think your offering has come exactly at the right time. It just feels, kind of the perfect alignment, as it were. If you're into the stars and moon, my husband is regularly quoted to me. But thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I think we're clearly going to be seeing a lot more of you and Carve over the coming years. And yeah, I'm excited for the future. Thank you.
And
Thank you
Fiona, just from
both.
my side, I really hope that this podcast inspires people who haven't looked into the AI tools. I think the level of excitement that you have around this, and I think the opportunities for them, don't be scared, be excited. And, please share those links with us so that we can share this with the podcast. Go and check those links out. Go and play with it. Go and explore it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Anela. It's been such a pleasure. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining this episode of the Assistant Lab. If you enjoyed this content, you know what you need to do. Feel free to share it and help us grow our subscriber base.
Join us again next time. And until then, keep experimenting, innovating, and improving your skill set.